I said it once, I'll say it again. Further practice and polish and better care and quality, if they keep making more of these, which I certainly hope they do, I think they can be even better. Each one can be subsequently better than the last. I'm totally here for it if they just keep making these things.
You saw what I saw. For once in your life, admit that you are up against something bigger than you.
Tonight, we are all afraid. We cannot hide from our ghosts. Whether they are real or not.
And today we have A Haunting in Venice. Haunting in Venice is the third installment in the, I guess you'd call them the Hercule Poirot, or Hercules if you're American or what have you. They're just Agatha Christie murder mysteries that have been adapted into film format and given that the modern tweak, but still are period pieces of various points in the Detective Poirot's life. Luckily, this is actually a pretty condensed summarization of it. Haunted in Venice is directed by the star of Haunted in Venice, Kenneth Branagh. Is a name that you probably might know, but it's definitely an actor who's been around for years and years and years. Like, mustache aside, the more you look into what he's been in, the more you recognize him and all that. But direction, funny enough, consistently, he's directed the previous two murder mystery films, first of which I didn't cover on my channel, unfortunately, but Murder on the Orient Express, the second of which I did cover on my channel. The review was put out about a year ago, so I guess it was like last year-ish, but Death in the Nile, I did cover that one, and now we have A Haunting in Venice. Aside from these murder mystery films, if you want to go to something else that Kenneth Branagh's done that received critical acclaim and that, funny enough, I did cover on my channel, Belfast. That was a good movie. Didn't love it, but I thought it was a good film overall. I enjoyed it. Now, of course, as with its predecessors, and some funny enough, similar vibe to like the Knives Out murder mysteries, although I feel that Knives Out and Glass Onion lean more towards their comedic elements with some serious moments. I feel like these murder mysteries have some comedic moments, but they take themselves more seriously overall. But same formula. You take a bunch of actors that are either fairly well known or pretty well known, and then you just have somebody die and then everybody tries to solve the thing. As I mentioned, Kenneth Branagh stars as Hercule Poirot, the brilliant OCD, borderline, I don't want to say narcissistic, but whenever I think of him in these movies, I think of that quote from the upcoming Napoleon film, where Napoleon, what does he say?
I'm the first to admit when I make a mistake. I simply never do.
I'd say in terms of top billed cast, we're seeing Michelle Yeoh come in as the medium in the film. I love seeing her in anything. Take something as old as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to something more recent like Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm always happy to see Michelle Yeoh. Funny little aside, because I thought I recognized the name and the actor and all that. Jamie Dornan of 50 Shades of Grey fame is also in this, which I thought was pretty funny. Worth mentioning, Tina Fey is also in the cast, and I always love seeing comedic actors take on serious roles, and this is definitely an example of that. I was curious if this kid had been in anything else. He was the lead, arguably the lead, of Belfast, so funny enough, I think Belfast was probably where he met Kenneth Branagh for the first time, was during the direction and filming of that film, so Kenneth probably brought him onto this project, but I really liked this kid in this movie, his character. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, what is there to say about Haunted in Venice? This may come as a surprise to no one, but as with the previous two installments, I really enjoyed this. Funny enough, I think Haunted in Venice might be my favorite out of the trilogy so far. Hercule Poirot finds himself in a situation, a room full of people, or somebody dies, typically the top billed cast. And then boom, he's thrust into a situation where he has to figure out and solve the murder. And those are always fun. I enjoy a good whodunit, especially if it's a period piece, and also if the aesthetic, you know, scratches all those parts of my brain. And something about like a bunch of people in like the 1920s, 30s, 40s that are all dressed, you know, appropriately, or suits and ties, vests, or what have you. There's some stashes thrown in there. In the case of Kenneth, I was going to do up my stash for this review. There's no way I can compare to the myth, the man, the legend over here. My problem typically in these films is I'll try to pay too much attention to what people are like doing directly on screen and the actors, and I'm not paying enough attention to what's being said and what's happening in, like around in the environment, and I'll typically miss something one way or another. I might like this one the most, and I don't know if there's a correlation here. This is the first one where I figured out the murderer about halfway through. Murder on the Orient Express, I didn't figure out the murderer, but I thought that the conclusion was kind of cheating, if I'm being honest, but I'm okay with it. Death on the Nile, didn't figure it out, didn't crack the code. And this one, though, I didn't figure out every major twist, but there were a couple where I was like, oh, well, this person's a red herring. This one, ooh, what do you want to bet it's this person here? And that's all well acted. The murder mystery angle and the characters, everything's intriguing, engaging. I was along for the ride. I was never bored or zoned out. There was an interesting thing they did here, and just kind of letting my mind wander right now, but there was a surprising lack of music in this. There was music there, but it was very sparse, and sometimes they even took away the sound effects and just let it be silent, or a little bit of, if I'm not mistaken, oboe? I think there was oboe playing to underscore some scenes, but this one felt somehow dark and somber, and almost not, I don't want to say ethereal, but mysterious. Hercule Poirot's been invited to this whole little, like, contact the deceased little session, with Michelle Yeoh being the aforementioned medium. Him and this writer are trying to just observe and discredit this medium, basically, and one way or another, through the trailer, alludes to somebody dies during the course of the night's events, and then the murder must be solved. But then you have this situation where there's, like, spooky things that he's seen, and something potentially supernatural or spiritual may be afoot, and now you have the very coded brain of his, where it's, oh, you know, fact, reason, science, deduction, and then you have the potential in the background of, okay, but are there some spooks and specters? Are there some ghoulies about? And there's some moments of like really good conversation tackling both sides of the issue, and some very well done little back and forth, little dramatic pieces of you know, one person interrogating another, one person expounding upon their belief system, and I dig that kind of stuff, so I was definitely here for it. By the end of it, when the revelations come about, I thought they were all pretty well earned. I don't think anything was too cheap or anything was like cheated. I thought it was just a solid murder mystery where there was a guilty party or guilty parties. You never know. I think the only things that are like a detraction for me really is that although this might be my favorite of the trilogy, I think in terms of setting, I still prefer Murder on the Orient Express, because I'm a guy who likes the idea of a train ride in the 1930s or something. Train's my favorite. This one is just kind of a house of spooks and supernatural this and that, sinking into the water and everything. It's a cool enough setting, but I didn't love it personally. Characters are all good, varied, fine. Some of them play into tropes and archetypes, but that's just kind of how these murder mysteries are. Writing's good, similar to what Rian Johnson does with The Knives Out and Glass Onion and all that. Things make sense on a second and third viewing. I mean, everything that you need to know is either discussed and you can deduce from there, or is shown on screen in some way or another. So if you pay attention, you can piece together the mystery, and I like a film like that. It's also, I was wrapping up the video and realized there were a few parts that I hadn't fully gone into, so I wanted to tack this on at the end. I liked how this one was shot, and I don't know if it was shot this way solely because of the location and the limitations they had with like direction and cinematography, like production design from that kind of standpoint, but a lot of the shots used when they weren't big rooms, they were like close quarters, a lot of Dutch angles, like what I mean by that is the Dutch tilt, like tilted angles or like close-ups or low close-ups, and I don't know, it gives the intimate claustrophobic feeling to the film, which you need in a film like this, because if it's a whodunit detective thriller, but it's like dark, there's murder afoot, there's potentially something supernatural in the air. So you combine all that, and of course it's going to kind of be like close quarters, very like, we're trapped in here, something spooky ooky might be out there, who do I trust? I almost wish they went more into Hercule Poirot's character. If I recall correctly, in Death on the Nile, the second film, you get like war flashbacks showing that he's seen the horrors of what humankind is capable of, which factors heavily into his belief system. And you've seen the horrors of what man can do, and there, ergo, you deduce that there is no higher power or God. There's just us, and we're just figuring it out. So that makes him an empathetic character for me. So although we don't get much in the way of flashbacks for his character in this one, I do like how we're still going more into his character. At the beginning of this film, he doesn't want to be a detective anymore. He's basically lured back into it by Tina Fey's character, and she wants to enlist the world's greatest detective into helping her debunk this person. So as a favor to her friend, but also lured in, and then, you know, as the film progresses, like, it's that part of him that he just can't turn away from, is wanting to, when he's in his element, is when he's solving these cases and when he's on the hunt for something, when he's trying to figure something out. So it's him trying to deny his true nature, but ultimately failing at such. I will say though, one thing this particular detective film whodunit series has going against it that Glass Onion and Knives Out don't. With Glass Onion and Knives Out, every actor in each of those respective films are so big that you truly don't know who's going to eat it, you know, who's going to die. With this one, there's well-known quantities in each film, but it's a pretty safe bet, and I've been right in every single case. It's a pretty safe bet in these films. Whoever the top billed cast is, they're gonna die. And I will say, for each film so far, my guess was correct. I was like, oh, there's gonna be a murder based on who I do and do not see in the trailer, and based on who the biggest known quantity in this film is. Or like a detective, you can deduce that, oh, they're probably gonna die then, aren't they? I'm kind of changing my review, mid-review, because I thought I knew what I wanted to give it, but considering this was my favorite so far out of all of these, and I sincerely hope they keep making more, you know, it's a film that tickles all the parts of my brain that I like to have tickle. I'd give A Haunting in Venice a high 4 out of 5. I'd say it's a high 4 out of 5. It's missing that certain wow factor for me. You could make some mild complaints about the pacing in Act 1, maybe. It does more properly and well than it does badly, I feel. I mean, I'm sure critics feel a little bit differently. I think they were hovering more around the 80 percentile last I checked, if you trust Rotten Tomatoes anymore. Maybe it's just my sleep-deprived brain. I just don't know what else I could add to this. It's another circumstance where I saw this film, meant to review it a day or two later, and here I am, late to the party once again because the last quarter of this year has been an absolute shit show so far. Definitely watch it in theaters, stream it at the very least, but I will eagerly await the next Hercule Poirot Murder Mystery. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.